Hi everyone, hope your week is off to a great start. I'm Silla A. Joy, and this week we're just continuing our series on singleness. So last week we had spoken about relationship with you being a privilege rather than a favor. And we looked at different aspects of that and how when we start to be comfortable with what God says about us, then we're in a position to also be with someone and recognize someone who's also comfortable with us. Well, this week may sound like a slight contradiction because the message of that was, well, don't settle for someone who isn't comfortable with you. But what we're going to do is compare God's ideal to what your ideal is. So it's quite a challenging question to ask ourselves. Am I single or could I be single? Because God's ideal and mine are so far apart from each other that his ideal doesn't even attract me. Or if God had an ideal person for me, I wouldn't even notice them because my mind is so far from what he has for me, or what I have in mind. My expectations are very far removed from his. So I guess a good place to start with that is looking at the biblical purpose of marriage. And a lot of time it's hard to lose sight of that with all the rom-coms and chick flicks, etc. But the basis of it is that marriage is for God's glory. That is one of the most fundamental things about marriage. And there are some verses that kind of speak about this. And one is in Romans 11, which talks about things being for him and to him and through him and for his glory. And this is in relation to God. And also in Colossians, it talks about all things being made through him. And that also applies to marriage. So marriage is for God, even though it involves you. Marriage was designed to be for the glory of God. So maybe after last week and watching that video, you thought, well, great. What are all the things that I want in a man? I'm comfortable with me, and so now I'm out to find a man according to high standards and not low ones, and I'm not just gonna fall for anyone. And so you started listing out your dream guy or girl from like Baywatch, or insert the saucy person of the opposite sex that tickles your fancy. And writing out what it is that you genuinely desire in a person is a good thing. And that is going to be the topic of next week's discussion, what the non-negotiable things are for you. But let's remember that the only way to really love ourselves is to do so according to God's standards. He gives us the love and we receive it from him first. So it's his love. But when it comes to the standards of a relationship, it's good to ask ourselves that one question. Am I more preoccupied with my standards or with God's? And God knows the answer, but it's really good to be honest. A lot of us would have to say, quite frankly, God, I am more interested in my standards in the area of maybe it's finances, maybe it's looks, maybe it's education, maybe it's upbringing, maybe it's height, maybe it's race, and the list goes on. It's good to know what you like because that means being self-aware, and that is a good thing. And God is not waiting for you to be an opinionless robot that just says, I don't care if he's 95 and has no teeth and he's senile because he loves Jesus. No. Whatever he puts along your path, you will still have to accept. So it's about being honest enough, though, in this time of singleness, about whether God's standards are truly our priority. Not meaning that I don't have an opinion, not meaning that I would go with anyone just because they love Jesus, but are his standards above my own, knowing that he will only ever give me what he knows is best for me. In the end, we have to make a choice anyway, but have we shunned those that God may have been pointing us to because they didn't look like what we had pictured in our head? It's just a good reality check to have. It's also good to think about the fact that your ideal often comes from the things that you have personally seen, which in most cases is your parents. But remember that the way a lot of us witnessed our parents in marriage was after they had been married for a while, after their finances had developed, after they had matured a whole lot. And so sometimes we compare a person that we see before marriage and think, well, they don't act like the way my dad or my mom acts. But you have to realize that mostly you've witnessed your parents once they had time to get things together a little bit. The point is that most likely when your parents met, they did not look like the picture that you have in your mind of have after years of hashing out issues and working on things and prayer. And so let's go back to practically what can we do. So we don't necessarily always know what God's ideal is, but in practice someone can come and be interested, or we can be interested in someone else. And so how do we react to that? What practically do we do? Well, I think one of the first steps is prayer. And let me just share what I think is helpful to do. So when I'm not interested in someone who might be interested in me, I say, God, I see this person and they seem interested and they're godly and they love you, no doubt, but they just seem so dry or humorless or rigid or short or whatever. I'm being completely honest. I just lay it out and say, this is what I see. And then I say, but God, how is this going to bring you glory if I'm bored to death with this person? That is what my prayer sounds like. But I give it to you, and you may see stuff that I don't see. And so I give however I feel about this person to you, and I ask you to take him away if that's not what you have in mind, or that you just warm me up to him. And the opposite. If I am interested in someone, and maybe that person's also interested in me, my prayer sounds kind of like this. God, I am so attracted to this guy for X, Y, and Z reason. He's funny, he's smart, he's attractive, blah, 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 blah. And it seems like it's reciprocal. But God, I genuinely don't know if this is the right fit. So only allow this to work if it will bring you glory. And I found that relationships shift with those kinds of prayers because we can rest assured that if God's glory is genuinely what we're looking for, He will move heaven and earth to lead you to that person that will accomplish that. No doubt He will move the people who don't need to be in your life out of the way, and He will bring the people who need to be in your life into your life. So that's it for this week. I hope you've enjoyed it. We've just been talking about our ideal in a relationship when we're single, and could we be single simply because we're not actually after God's ideal but our own, and the idea that biblically a marriage is intended to bring God glory. We didn't go into any of the other things necessarily that marriage is also, but that is really the priority. And so then we looked at, how to go about relationships in an honest way before Him, to bring them before Him and say, God, I don't like this guy, or God, I really do like this guy. So what are you thinking? What shall we do? Bringing all those issues to Him and trusting Him to weed out the wrong kind of guys and bring in the right kind of guys. So in comparison to last week, it was about having God's view of ourselves so that we could say, actually, no, this guy isn't living up to the standard that I think God would have for me. But also at the same time saying, God, I do trust you to bring the right kind of guy, maybe in a way that I don't see right now, but I'm trusting you to change me or change him in order to make this work. Thanks for watching. Have a great week. Share, like, subscribe. See you next week where we'll be talking about that list of non-negotiables. God, please don't let me end up with a beast.